When you move into a new apartment, you always find traces of someone else's life. A forgotten coffee mug, an old magazine, a scratch on the floorboards. What I found was a worn-out diary shoved behind a warped baseboard in the bedroom. I would have thrown it away if not for the very last entry, written in a shaky, frantic hand on the final page. It was just one sentence. There's a new rule here. Never look your reflection in the eyes. I chuckled. Some silly prank left for the next tenant. But the apartment was, in fact, strange. It was cheap, in an old building with echoing stairwells. It was always colder inside than it was outside, and at night the vents would breathe these quiet drafts that sounded almost like whispers. That rule from the diary got stuck in my head like a splinter. For the first couple of days, I followed it unconsciously. I'd brush my teeth staring down into the sink. I'd shave by focusing on the blade, not my face. But curiosity is a powerful thing, stronger than the fear of the unknown. On the third day, I decided I'd had enough. I walked into the bathroom, flickered on the light. The old fluorescent lamp groaned as it came to life, and I made myself look. I met my own gaze in the mirror. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. A tired guy, me, was staring back from behind the glass. I even gave him a little wink. He, of course, winked back. I felt like an idiot and let out a sigh of relief. But after that night, everything changed. At first it was small things, objects not being where I left them. The keys I always put on the counter would be on the kitchen table. The book I was reading would be on the windowsill, not the couch. I blamed it on exhaustion, the stress of moving. Then I started noticing oddities with the reflection itself. It was almost imperceptible, a fleeting feeling that when I turned away from the mirror, its eyes would follow me for a fraction of a second too long. One morning, after a shower, I wiped the steam from the glass, and I could have sworn my reflection smiled, and I hadn't. I froze, my heart dropping into my stomach. But no matter how long I stared afterward, it was a perfect copy of me. Just a trick of the light and the steam. Probably. I found the diary again. The entries were chaotic. The previous tenant, a man named Arthur, had described the same things. First, the euphoria of cheap housing. Then, the growing paranoia. "It moves my things," he wrote. "It wants me to know it's here. Not the thing in the mirror, the other one." The other one? That thought was a needle of ice in my spine. I kept reading. Arthur wrote that the other one was a creature that lived in the corners of your eyes, in your peripheral vision, a thing that fed on attention. The more you thought about it, the stronger it became. My reflection, "It's not me," one entry read. "It's a warden. It watches me to make sure I don't look at it." The rule, "It isn't for my safety. It's for its safety." I didn't understand, but the fear was no longer just curiosity. It had become a sticky, suffocating presence. I began to see movement in the dark corners of the apartment. Out of the corner of my eye, the shadow in a doorway would become darker than it should be. I'd hear a faint scratching from inside a wall when the building was perfectly silent. The final entries in the diary were almost illegible. "It's stronger now. I can feel its eyes on the back of my neck, even when there are no mirrors in the room. The warden is getting weaker. He can't watch forever. I made a mistake today. I looked him in the eyes, and then I looked away. He looked scared, not for himself, for me. I heard him. He screamed, silently. And then came the last, most terrifying entry. The rule was wrong. I understood too late. The point isn't to avoid his eyes. It's the opposite. You must never look away. The reflection is a lock. Our shared gaze is the key that keeps the door bolted. As long as we watch each other, we're both safe. But if you break contact, if you look away, the door opens. I started to tremble. This whole time I had been making things worse. Every time I avoided his gaze, I was loosening the lock. And then came that evening, the one you've already seen. I walked into the bathroom, not out of curiosity, out of pure animal terror. I had to fix it. I had to lock the door again. I stood before the mirror, feeling an icy breath on my neck, the breath of the other one. I raised my eyes. This is where that recording began. There's a new rule in this house. Never look your reflection in the eyes. But I already knew that was a lie. I stared. I locked my gaze with my reflection, and in its eyes I didn't see me. I saw a silent plea, terror. It was begging me not to look away. We were two prisoners holding the door to a monster cell. Suddenly, behind my back, in the reflection, a shadow darted, fast, inky black. Instinct, primal animal instinct screamed inside me, and I made the fatal mistake. I broke the real rule. I turned around. Of course, no one was there. The bathroom was empty. A second of relief that was immediately swallowed by absolute, all-consuming horror. I slowly, so slowly, turned back to the mirror. And it had not turned back. My reflection was still standing with its back to me, staring into the exact corner I had just looked at. The door was open. The lock was broken. And then it hit me. It's not looking at me. It's looking at what's standing behind me. And in that moment, in the ringing silence that followed, I felt it. The cold spot on my neck became an icy touch. I heard a quiet, dry click, like a joint popping right next to my ear. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I could only stare at the back of my reflection, my failed warden. And then it began to slowly, with an unnatural crunch, turn its head, not towards me. It was as if it was trying to look over my shoulder. It wasn't going to scream at me. It wanted one last look at the thing it could no longer contain. And then it screamed, silently, just like Arthur wrote. Its mouth in the reflection twisted into an impossible wail of agony and despair. This wasn't a screamer aimed at me. This was the cry of a battle that had been lost. The last thing I saw before the light bulb finally died, plunging me into darkness, weren't his eyes. It was the two long, thin, spider-like shadows that fell over my shoulders from behind. The rule was never about how to look. It was about who was looking at you. And the answer was that it was never
alone.